cannabis is medicine, why are we creating a whole new system? Let's use the healthcare professionals like you and me who already know the other stuff, and let's integrate them into cannabis medicine, and we'll just be able to help people.
Hola, soy el Dr. Max Alzamora y les doy la bienvenida a Sinergia, este podcast en el que busco entrevistar a personas que vienen contribuyendo alrededor del mundo al desarrollo del cannabis. Bueno, continuamos con el podcast Sinergia y seguimos desde la UCLA en la conferencia de la Society of Cannabis Clinicians, y ahora tengo el agrado de presentar a Codi Peterson. Él es doctor en farmacia, él trabaja en el Hospital Pediátrico de California y lo vengo siguiendo hace un buen tiempo, y muchos de nosotros que estamos en el tema del cannabis también, porque él se encarga de poner dentro de sus redes información súper valiosa y con una propuesta moderna e interesante que la hace mucho más atractiva. Así que ahora tenemos semanalmente información que Codi nos presenta acerca de las nuevas rutas, de cómo el cannabis funciona en nuestro sistema endocannabinoide, qué otros receptores tenemos, qué otros cannabinoides interactúan en otros lugares. Así que es información bastante relevante y actualizada. Y para mí, como lo dije, es un gusto tener a Codi en este podcast y poder hacerle algunas preguntas. Hi, Codi.
Hello.
We are going to start with the first question, and is, how do you become interested in the use of cannabis as medicine?
Well, I love this question because it takes me all the way back to college. Now, I was someone who, when I was a young teenager, I hadn't really experimented with cannabis. I didn't try until I was already in university. And I thought, there was something to it. I quite enjoyed it. But it wasn't until a few years later, while I was in the midst of pharmacy school, and what had happened is the woman I was dating, her grandmother had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. As you know, a very serious terminal illness. And she was struggling, going to pass away. And was unable to eat, was in a lot of pain. And grandma actually requested some hot brownies. And we sort of facilitated it, me and my partner at the time. And we made a cake and we gave it to grandma. And for 2 days, 2 days before she passed away, she had a beautiful experience sharing a meal with her family, calling her grandchildren and saying goodbyes and having her talk. When even just 2 days before the brownies, before we made the cake, she was in bed, not awake, not arousable, taking the standard palliative care medicine, which is morphine and Ativan or lorazepam. And these are sedative medications to help with pain, but they also diminish our cognition. And THC allowed her to sort of live her life. At that point, I was still in traditional pharmacy school. I hadn't even considered cannabis medicine as a future, but that was the seed. And then many years later, it was 2018, I heard about the program at University of Maryland. So I went back and I got my master's degree in cannabis science.
Okay, nice. What is Canigma?
What is the Canigma? Well, the Canigma is a science-forward media company trying to answer people's questions, real-world questions, the ones you punch into Google. So the Canigma is really trying to help give people evidence, or maybe evidence-based is wrong, is trying to present people with fact-based information, science-backed, and really what we're doing that's unique is we're providing an expert review. So unfortunately, most of the places you go to get your answers about weed on the internet are less than reputable. They don't necessarily have a lot of backing or
maybe
vetting.
companies, no?
Sure, or they have an incentive, right? Yeah. They're trying to sell you a product. But the Canigma's opposite. Certainly we would love you to come to the website and click on some products and go buy them. But really what we want to do, our primary goal is to answer questions. And we do it pretty well, I'd like to think. And we do it with an expert review. So if you're familiar with the website WebMD, this is WebMD for weed.
Nice. How do you see the future of cannabis research?
I'm hopeful. For a long time, research was stifled by the Schedule I status of marijuana in the United States. Slowly, that's begun to change. Even in 2018, the CBD sort of came online, and there's been a lot of interest in other non-THC cannabinoids. Once the federal government changes it from Schedule I status to hopefully descheduled, maybe Schedule III, as was just proposed this past week in the United States, once we get to that point, it'll really open up a lot more research, even more. Because right now, you need to get a very strict license to study cannabis. I'm hopeful that once that changes, we can start to decrease some stigma, support more evidence for the use of THC, and then for me, what I'm most interested in is seeing how THC, a little bit of it, plus all these other cannabinoids can really create sort of that whole plant effect that a lot of us here at this conference believe is where the magic happens.
Continue with that part of cannabinoids, new cannabinoids. Which cannabinoid do you see as promising now?
Oh, so I think cannabis is a complex medicine. So I think it depends on what is ailing the individual, which will help. It also has a lot to do, and again, as we learned at the conference, what exactly is the underlying condition and the underlying genetics of the person who's taking the cannabis medicine. So I think there's a lot of molecules that show promise. But personally, I'm super interested in CBG, cannabidiol, and CBGA, the acidic form or the raw form of that molecule. And the reason is for a couple complicated pharmacological effects, but in particular, CBG is known to activate a receptor called the alpha-2 receptor. So this is part of our fight or flight system. And normally when we get adrenaline, which is what activates our fight or flight, it causes what you would think is stimulation. But actually built into our fight or flight system, there's a feedback mechanism. And in that feedback mechanism is alpha-2. So when we take CBG, we actually get a decrease in our sympathetic tone or our fight or flight response, which is really what a lot of us are dealing with: chronic stress, chronic anxiety. And if CBG can help those two things and maybe help us sleep too, now we're talking about helping the masses.
And what about the different ways of administrate cannabis? No, because yesterday I was at a dispensary that I see transdermal patches for pain, and it's new for me. No, I see crackers, I see a lot of things. But what do you think? It's not too fancy, too much about that?
So the challenge lies in evidence. There's no evidence to support that patch at this time. Versus FDA regulated products, we have very controlled evidence. However, cannabinoids don't have to be separate. We don't have to create a whole new category for this molecule. It's still medicine. It just so happens to come from this plant that has been stigmatized for too long. So I am hopeful that all of those routes of administration, those dosage forms, that they all have promise depending on the situation. So if my patient cannot take things orally, then a patch can be super helpful. If my patient has super sensitive skin, a patch is not very helpful, and I would probably want to go with an oral product. All of these dosage forms can be used in conjunction, just like we do with all the other medicines, where you get a patch for pain, but you also take a pill every so many hours as needed. So instead of recreating the system, let's acknowledge that cannabis is medicine and just start treating it like that, and there'll be a lot less skepticism, and I think a lot more open-mindedness to the way we can combine these cannabinoids and these dosage forms.
I know you are a professor now in the university and you are teaching about cannabis, the pharmacology of cannabis. What do you think about the education? Not only here, no, around the world, because you have an expand view of this. No?
Yeah. Look, it's not good enough yet. That's my gut feeling, is we are not where we need to be. There are too many physicians, too many pharmacists, that are not prepared to have the real conversations with their patients. Patients are already using this medicine, and generally healthcare professionals are not prepared. I will highlight, though, that change is happening. I'm living proof of that change. So it was only last year that University of California, Irvine opened up a professor position, and myself and some colleagues are now teaching that class. It's cannabis pharmacology to pharmacists. UCSD now has a program. Here at UCLA, they have a Center for Excellence, and they have a class for their graduate students. More and more, we're seeing that adoption, but I think the biggest challenge still remains medical schools. I think that medical schools are sort of the keystone that we need to convert, and they're not quite there yet. Now that's sort of focusing on the United States. If we zoom out, I see a lot of interest around the world, whether it's the UK, who's a couple years behind us, or whether it's South and Central America, who's really sort of pushing the envelope towards normalizing and sort of building a realistic structure around this. Once again, if cannabis is medicine, why are we creating a whole new system? Let's use the healthcare professionals like you and me who already know the other stuff, and let's integrate them into cannabis medicine, and we'll just be able to help people. We don't have to overcomplicate it. Do we know the exact dose of the exact cannabinoid for every person? No. But we don't know that for any medicine. There is no medicine on the planet that we say, oh, this is the dose for you, just take it and set it and forget it. It's not the way medicine works. We just have to be able to show that it's safe, and then we have to thoughtfully titrate up, aiming to achieve our patients' goals. We got to stop overcomplicating it, and frankly, what I tell my pharmacy students is, you already have the skills you need to do this. We've already taught you all of this. Now we just need to teach you about cannabis, the endocannabinoid system, and you're off to the races. And the same goes for physicians, and the same goes for nurses, and every other healthcare professional. The skills are transferable. We just need to give them the knowledge about cannabis.
Some final words for the Latam people, especially in Peru. I told you you have fans in Peru that follow you.
Flattering, Max, because it's my goal as doing what I'm doing is to elevate the message that cannabis is medicine, healthcare professionals need to be involved, and destigmatize. Like, we need to stop pretending this is some sort of narcotic that's killing people. We already have that problem. This is a plant, and you can't make a plant illegal. We've shown it. Look around the world. Despite being illegal around the world, cannabis is still then pretty normal, the most common substance or plant. So legalize nature, regulate plants like plants, regulate drugs like drugs. I would take that and say to Latin America, we shouldn't work so hard on creating a copycat industry. Like, we don't need weed to look like alcohol, and we don't need it to look exactly like pharma, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel either. We already know how this looks. We know when patients should be followed up. So advice for Latin America. Let me reflect on that for 1 second. Don't free the plant. Allow anyone who wants to cultivate the plant to cultivate the plant. They can self-medicate. Use your healthcare professionals to create a medical market that services patients who want it, and that will appeal to everyone. What we see a lot in the United States is we've seen companies create sort of internal structures, like California has its own industry, and Oklahoma has its own industry, and Pennsylvania has its own rules, and it's fragmented, and everyone is struggling to sort of figure out the way the market should be, when we can just make more cohesive federal policies, and Peru says, okay, you can grow your own, and doctors can talk about it, and they can prescribe it, and when we decrease all those barriers, things will settle out naturally. But what happened in the States and what happened in Canada is they created a lot of rules, a lot of regulations, lots of money came in, but not a lot of money is being made because of regulatory burden and a little bit of greed. So my advice is don't copy us, but learn from our mistakes and improve upon what we've started.
Thank you, Codi. Bueno, este fue Codi Peterson. Hemos aprendido mucho de su experiencia y esperamos que siga brindándonos toda esa educación y de esa manera, como les dije, tan moderna, tan fácil de acceder y entender. Tengo unos, I have presents for you.
Oh, great.
This is the notebook about the last conference we have in Peru.
This is nice. Look at the colors on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
This is the lanyard.
Uh-huh.
And this is Condor Cana, is my vape brand. and it's a one-to-one. We was talking about that he likes the one-to-one because he continues focus and relax.
Yeah.
This is for you.
Yeah, there's some evidence to say that the CBD can modulate the effects of THC, and that has been my experience as well. This is really nifty, and I needed one, so I appreciate you, Max. Thank you so much.
Gracias, y ahora nos vamos a la conferencia porque todavía quedan y me toca hablar a mí también, así que nos vemos en una siguiente oportunidad. Esto fue Sinergia, donde, como les dije, tratamos de tener la voz de las personas que vienen generando la evidencia, que vienen generando educación acerca del cannabis como medicina. Nos vemos.
Vemos.